Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Well, welcome back to my channel again. A rather different topic. This is about the new Archbishop of Canterbury. You may remember that Justin Welby tendered his resignation way back in November to do with his mishandling of the Smith allegations. What was the guy's name? John Smith, Smythe, Smyth, who'd molested boys in the 1980s at the UN camps. And Welby was even a volunteer at them from the age of 19 to say 22, and said he had not the slightest inkling this is going on. I have no reason to doubt that. But when he came in as Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby was apprised of the allegations and thought it had been sufficiently dealt with. Blah, blah, blah. Smith subsequently died of natural causes, I think never having been prosecuted. But anyway, so he stood down just after that interview with Kathy Newman of Channel 4. So who's been the next Archbishop? And it's a snail's pace, this process for choosing the next Archbishop of Canterbury. Remember, he, and so far it only ever has been a he, is the highest priest in England. Is not the Primate of England. There are only two Archbishops of the Church of England. The other one being the Archbishop of York. So the Archbishop of Canterbury is primarily in charge in southern England. York is primarily in charge in northern England, but of the two, Canterbury outranks York, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, he crowns the monarch and officiates at royal weddings, funerals, and so forth. Yeah, having stood down in November, it's shocking it's not till this November that a new one will be chosen. So they'll take soundings. Is he or she a good egg? What do they thought about in people think about them in the diocese? What does the media say? Are there any skeletons in this person's cupboard? And remember, in 1994, that's when the Anglican Church permitted women to be ordained. Now, some Protestant denominations had allowed the ordination of women, if that's the word, to be ministers. They don't have priests. Some of the other Protestant denominations, in the early 20th century, like the Methodist Church or the Baptist Church, the Church of Scotland, and so forth, which is Presbyterian. Anyway, so the Church of England had some resistance from the Anglo-Catholics, the High Anglicans, those who practice Catholicism inside the Church of England. They say they're Catholics, but they're not Roman Catholics. For Anglo-Catholics, the British monarch is the head of their church, the Pope is not. But apart from that, they believe in sacraments, maybe even 7, and they believe in transubstantiation. They venerate saints, particularly the Blessed Virgin. They prefer their priests to be unwed, dress them as father, have monks and nuns, and go on pilgrimages. The bells and smells, even inscriptions in Latin in their churches occasionally talk about mass or mass, everything, but they don't have the Pope as the head. But anyway, so the word on the street is the person's going to get it is Guli Francis Dehqani. Her name comes from gulnar, as in flower in Farsi. So she's ethnically Iranian. So that's two birds with one stone, a woman and an ethnic minority person. And so she's born in 1966 in Isfahan, one of the largest cities in Iran. And yes, there are Iranian Christians, very few, but there were a few more. And her father was also an Anglican bishop. Remember, the Church of England's got the Anglican Communion. There are Anglican churches all over the globe. So no more jokes about vicars' daughters, please. But I have found that clergymen's daughters, or clergy women's daughters these days, they go one way or the other. They either completely embrace Christianity, or they find it deeply embarrassing, try and live it down and be a real wild child. Well, she has followed in her father's footsteps. Anyway, so she was ordained in the 90s. You have to do 3 years to train to be an Anglican priest. If you already have a theology degree, it's only 2. And for the first year, you're a deacon, as in you're assisting a priest. And if you're good enough, then wind up to ordination. So I suppose 4 years, possibly. I mean, okay. So she's been was ordained a long time ago. She came to the United Kingdom as a child. Because there was a lot of hatred against Christians at the time. And yeah, her maternal grandfather was also an Anglican bishop. So she came to the UK at the age of 14, and she studied at the University of Nottingham in music, and she's got higher degrees in theology from the University of Bristol. So about religious feminism. And then she worked for the BBC in religious broadcasting and so forth. So was a deacon, then a priest, and she was in Southwark in London, and so on. I believe she's she's married and she has children. Her husband is also an Anglican clergyman. What else can I say about her? So then she was Bishop of Loughborough. Okay, and she's an ethnic minority woman, and particularly interested in the Church of England's outreach to ethnic minority people. And obviously, the Church of England is open to all religious denominations, but traditionally didn't have that many non-white communicants. The non-white Christians were often in other denominations, the so-called black churches and so forth, or else they're Catholics. So anyway, she's been Bishop of Chelmsford and Essex for the last 4 years. Had her work cut out preaching morality to all those Essex girls. Well, they're my kind of women, and she's particularly interested in affordable housing, social housing for the impecunious, and she's in the House of Lords because there are about 40 Church of England bishops, and the 26 longest serving get to be in the House of Lords. It's like a queue. So if she became Bishop of Chelmsford, she probably wouldn't be in the House of Lords straight away. And when somebody else retires from another see, then she bumps up and she eventually gets into the House of Lords. So when she stops being Bishop of Chelmsford, the new Bishop of Chelmsford won't be in the House of Lords straight away. Have to wait till he or she is one of the 26 longest serving. Of course, if you're a bishop for a very short period of time, you might never get into the House of Lords. The Archbishop of York and the Archbishop of Canterbury got an ex officio in the House of Lords. I know that's contentious. Why should only one religious denomination have a legislative role? I know there are people like the National Secular Society, the British Humanists Association, said there ought to be complete separation between church and state, and there should be no episcopal role in the House of Lords. But if there is to be an episcopal bench, there's got to be one for all religious denominations. So she's had some notable publications, Cries for a Lost Homeland and Stations of the Resurrection, about her experience as a Christian, her growing faith, the sort of persecution that she suffered, lost her homeland. You'll often hear on Radio 4 on Thought for the Day. She believes in interfaith dialogue, speaking to her separated brethren, Muslims and so forth. So she said she's got no anti-Muslim prejudice whatsoever, despite her experiences. And obviously, she wants to support the beleaguered Christian community in Iran. They're mostly actually ethnic Armenians, Christians in Iran. Anyway, she doesn't speak out in the Middle East very much. What about much put upon oppressed Christian suffering genocide in Palestine and elsewhere? So, all right, so she's a little bit right on, as they said in the 90s. Woke might be the word. So the ideal way to move on from this child abuse scandal is in pointing her. Is that nobody suggests that Welby ever molested a child. Absolutely not. The allegation is that he didn't take serious action when he was appointed to the Archbishopric of Canterbury against John Smith, who'd been caning boys severely in these UN camps. And then he left the country, went to Zimbabwe in the 1980s, was up to doing similar things, encouraging teenage boys to bathe nude with him. Who lived in Winchester, who's involved in the whatever Christian Society in Winchester College, had them come to his house. He was a judge, so he was seen to be a pillar of the community. You don't get more respectable than that. He was married, he had children, so he had to be all right. And he had a soundproof garden shed, would bring them one-on-one, asking whether they committed to onanism, whether they entertained thoughts of impurity, whether they must be purified by pain, and he would administer this caning with their consent. Obviously, the consent is vitiated by various factors. Plus, they were minors, and I know, whatever, school magisterial caning was permitted until the 90s, but he wasn't their teacher. And in the law of the 80s, allowed a maximum of 6 strokes, absolute maximum. It had to be an offence of the greatest severity to merit that. But he was hitting them way more, and he wasn't their teacher. There was no legal defence to this. And presumably deriving some sort of immoral gratification therefrom. And then he moved to South Africa, where he's part of the anti-gay movement there. So he died unshriven and unprosecuted. That is the late and unlamented John Smythe. But we're moving on to someone who's very different, supposedly a Christian of the best possible kind. Guli, she's known Frances Dehqani, because Frances is her husband's surname. Okay, so the announcement will be made in November. So I don't know who's running the Church of England in the meantime. The Dean of Canterbury, he runs the cathedral because the Archbishop is away so much. Every cathedral has a dean, but the Dean of Canterbury is very important. There was that red dean in the 1950s, that communist one, I forget his name. But we shall see. And then the Prime Minister actually eventually chooses. The 2 names are submitted by a Church of England committee, and then he will make the recommendation to His Gracious Majesty Charles of that name III, and His Britannic Majesty will formally appoint this person, and she will be enthroned this November. Now, remember in 2002, when George Carey was standing down and Rowan Williams was mooted in the newspapers to be the one who's going to get it. I remember speaking to an Anglican clergy, the late Father David Johnson, and he's saying, well, there's a rumor in the press, it could be someone who wants to destroy his chances by gloating about whatever, leaking it to journalists and that'll scrap it, and the powers that be won't like this one, it won't happen. So what are the criteria? And I suppose not too young, not too old, seem to have done well in the diocese, no scandal, a good communicator, not a loony, likely to attract people to the church. It was sad when a Fabian socialist, he doesn't know that this is the nation has best strengthen it for the sake of it. Shalom from error. I'm not sure how to strengthen these nations. All right, thank you so much. What do you think? Will it be her? Goodbye.